Get her out of my courtroom!
A federal prosecutor screamed it at a 26-year-old woman in a burgundy suit. She, the woman he'd just dismissed, didn't flinch. Calm, steady, she set her credentials on the table right beside her client's handcuffs. Have you ever watched someone underestimated right before they destroyed the person doing it? I'm the host of this channel. Stories like this one are exactly why I started it. Stick around. In the next few minutes, a corrupt judge is about to lose everything. So is a lying prosecutor. So quietly is a betrayed nephew. All of it built on someone else's silence. Subscribe now because you will not believe how this one ends.
Wrong move. He entirely underestimated the girl from the streets. No one knew what was coming.
Maya Jackson was 31 years old, 3 years out of a public defender's office that paid her less than a bailiff's overtime, and she walked past 4 armed men like they were coat racks. Her heels hit the marble in the same rhythm over and over, a metronome nobody in that courtroom had asked to hear. The brass compass swung against her collarbone with every step, old. Scratched along the rim, not decoration. A compass only means something to someone who has been lost before. She reached the defense table. She set her credentials down flat next to Jin-Soo Park's handcuffed wrists. No flourish, no speech, just the sound of a folder meeting wood. Who let this child in here? Richard Sterling didn't look up right away. He let the silence stretch, first the way a man does when he's used to being the loudest thing in any room he enters. Then he turned slow, gold gavel pin catching the overhead lights. This is a federal proceeding, not a daycare. Laughter moved through the gallery. Not loud, just enough to sting. Maya didn't flinch. She opened her folder instead and set it beside the forged ledgers Sterling had slammed down minutes earlier, corner to corner precise. Bar number 88214, Your Honor, admitted to the Second Circuit in 2019. I'm entering my appearance as lead counsel for Mr. Park, effective immediately. Patricia Owens was 62 years old, 11 years on the federal bench, and she had built a reputation on never once looking surprised in open court. She looked surprised now. Her gavel stayed raised, suspended, like she'd forgotten what it was for. Counsel, this hearing was scheduled to proceed without further disruption. With respect, Your Honor, Title 18, Section 3006. A guarantees the defendant's right to counsel of his choosing. That right doesn't expire because Mr. Sterling finds my age inconvenient. Sterling's smile thinned, barely, a hairline crack in polished stone. Your Honor, this is a stunt, a publicity stunt dressed up as legal strategy. Then Your Honor can rule on the record, Maya said. Not on Mr. Sterling's feelings. The room went quiet in a way that has weight. Pressing. Not the silence of nothing happening. The silence of people recalculating who was actually in charge of the room. Jin-Soo Park sat through all of it without moving. Silver hair combed the way it always was, even in handcuffs, even with his empire being carved apart on a table 12 feet away. His eyes found Maya once. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. Owens exhaled through her nose, long, reluctant. The court will accept counsel's appearance on the record. Sterling's jaw worked once hard, like he was chewing something bitter he refused to swallow in public. He stepped back from the table, not far, just far enough to pretend it was his idea. Enjoy the paperwork, counselor, he said. It's the only thing you'll be filing before this case is over. Maya didn't answer. She sat. She opened a second folder thinner and slid it into her briefcase at an angle calculated to catch the light exactly once, long enough for a bank logo to flash across the leather, long enough for Sterling to see it. He saw it. His eyes lingered half a second too long. That half second told her everything. 12 people were watching from the gallery. None of them understood yet what had just been planted on that table. The bailiffs shifted at the doors, unsure whether the disruption was over. Marcus Thorne stood near the back wall, arms crossed, saying nothing, the way a man says nothing when he's already decided whose side he's not going to admit he's on yet. Owens banged her gavel once, not in anger, in surrender to a schedule that no longer belonged to her. We're adjourned until Thursday. Chairs scraped. Voices rose low, urgent, the particular hum of a room full of people who had just watched a script get torn up in real time. Sterling gathered his files, fast, sharp movements, a man performing calm for an audience that no longer fully believed him. Maya stayed seated a moment longer. She watched Jinsu get led away by two marshals, wrists bound spine straight. He looked back once. She held his gaze, steady, level, the kind of look that doesn't need translation. Then she stood, gathered her folders, and walked out the same way she'd walked in. Past the bailiffs, past the gallery, past Sterling, who didn't look at her this time. He didn't need to. He'd already made his first mistake. Nobody in that courthouse yet knew why Jinsu's expensive lawyers had vanished overnight, why a 31-year-old public defender had shown up in their place with a bank logo and a brass compass, or what was sitting in that thin second folder. The real trial had just begun. The consultation room smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet glue, fluorescent light buzzing overhead like it hadn't been replaced since Jinsu's restaurant first opened its doors. Maya had been in it for 11 minutes when Richard Sterling walked in without knocking. He didn't sit. He never sat when he could stand over someone instead. Two paralegals wheeled in 4 sealed boxes behind him, then a third, then a fourth, stacking them on the table until the wood groaned under the weight. "Discovery," Sterling said. "All of it, every page the government's obligated to give you." Maya opened the first box. Loose paper, no index, no tabs, no order at all, just years of banking records dumped like landfill. "How many pages?" 4,000 give or take." Sterling checked his watch gold band, the kind that costs more than most people's rent. "Evidentiary hearings at 9 tomorrow morning. 12 hours, counselor. Better get reading." "This isn't discovery, this is burial. Call it whatever helps you sleep." He smiled thin, rehearsed a smile built for cameras that weren't in the room yet. "I'm sure a public defender's used to long nights." Marcus Thorne stood by the door, rumpled trenchcoat notepad tucked under one arm, watching the whole exchange with the stillness of a man counting violations in his head. 12-hour turnaround on 4,000 unindexed pages. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. His jaw said it for him. Sterling left laughing before the door even clicked shut behind him. Not loud, just enough to be heard. Just enough to sting. Maya didn't move for a moment. She stood there, hand flat on the nearest box, breathing once slow, controlled. Not defeat. Calculation. Then she pulled out her phone. "I need 6 people," she said, no greeting, no preamble. "Tonight. Data entry, cross-reference, anyone who can read a spreadsheet without sleeping." By midnight, she had 4. By 1 in the morning, she had 6 spread across 3 time zones, each assigned 200 pages, each given the same instruction. Flag anything that repeats. Flag anything too clean. Flag anything that looks like a human being tired at 3 a.m. instead of a machine that never gets tired at all. The numbers didn't add up. Not wrong. Wrong would have been easy. They were too right. Page after page, the same rounding pattern, the same decimal drift, always landing on numbers ending in .00 or .50. Never the messy fractions real transactions leave behind. A human accountant makes mistakes. A human accountant forgets a receipt, transposes a digit, rounds inconsistently under deadline pressure. This wasn't that. Maya sat back in her chair at 4 a.m., staring at 11 flagged pages spread across the table like evidence in its own right. Not evidence of Jinsu's guilt, evidence of Sterling's. "Someone built these," she said to no one, to the empty room, to the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. "Somebody wrote an algorithm to fake a paper trail." She thought of the internal codes required to access account structures this specific, this deep inside Jinsu's organization. Not public information, not something a prosecutor's office could invent from outside. Someone on the inside had handed Sterling the keys. She didn't know who yet. That absence sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't put down. By 7 that morning, her eyes burned from the screen, her coffee had gone cold twice, and her paralegal team had confirmed the pattern across 11 separate document sets. 11 separate proofs of the same lie repeated with mechanical precision. Sterling never expected anyone to catch in 12 hours. He'd counted on exhaustion. He'd counted on a young defender drowning in paper, giving up somewhere around page 2000, walking into court unprepared and outmatched. He hadn't counted on 6 people who didn't sleep working across 3 time zones for a woman who didn't ask for help unless she already knew exactly what to do with it. Marcus Thorne found her still at the table at 8 a.m., same posture, same stillness from the night before, except now a single legal pad sat in front of her covered edge to edge in numbers and arrows. You find something. I found a machine pretending to be a man. Maya didn't look up. Somebody inside Jinsu's own organization made that possible. Thorne's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Outside the consultation room, the courthouse was waking up, footsteps in the hallway doors opening, the day's docket beginning to move. Sterling would walk in soon, expecting a beaten woman and a stack of unread paper. He would get neither. The numbers had been lying. Now they were about to testify against the man who made them. The visitors' room at the federal holding facility had none of the courthouse's polish. Cinder block walls painted the color of old teeth. A single table bolted to the floor. Jinsu Park sat on the other side of it in an orange jumpsuit that did nothing to soften the way he still carried himself. Spine-straight hands folded a man who had survived worse rooms than this one. Maya slid a legal pad across the table, covered in her own handwriting. 11 pages, she said. All flagged, all showing the same decimal pattern. No accountant makes the same rounding error 11 separate times across 4 years of ledgers. Jinsu studied the numbers for a long moment, silent, the kind of silence that has weight. Someone built this, he said finally. Someone with access to your internal account structure. Someone who understood exactly which codes to feed a machine to make it look like your money moving your way. His eyes lifted to hers. Steady, old. Not Sterling's people, not from outside. No, Maya said, from inside. The door opened before either of them could say more. Dae-jung Park stepped in wearing a watch that cost more than the guard's monthly salary, standing behind him, gold-faced diamond bezel, the kind of piece a man wears when he needs the world to forget where he came from. 34 years old nephew by blood, junior partner in name, only sweat already beating along his hairline, despite the room's stale recycled air. Uncle, his voice cracked on the word. I just came to see how you're holding up. Jinsu's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did a flicker, small, the look of a man recalculating a math problem he thought he'd already solved. Maya watched Dae-jung's hands. Not his face. Hands don't lie the way faces do. Nice watch, she said. New. A gift. From who? Does it matter? It might. She kept her voice flat level, the voice of someone asking about whether, not treason. You've closed on 2 properties this month. Cash. No financing. That's an odd year to be expanding given your uncle's accounts are frozen. Dae-jung's jaw tightened. He looked at the door. He looked at his uncle. He looked anywhere except at Maya. I don't have to answer that. No, Maya agreed. But you're going to. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply waited the way water waits at the base of a cracked dam, patient, certain, in no hurry at all. Dae-jung's composure came apart in pieces. First, his hands fidgeting with a cufflink that didn't need adjusting. Then his breathing shallow, uneven. Then his mouth moving before his brain caught up to stop it. The timeline's already set, he said. The asset transfer schedule, it's locked. There's nothing anyone can do about the forfeiture now. It's already been filed with the DA's office. The paperwork's done. He stopped. Too late. Silence dropped over the room like a lid closing on a box. "How would you know the DA's asset forfeiture timeline?" Maya said quietly. "Unless someone inside that office told you directly." Dae-jung's face drained of color, the kind of pale that isn't sickness, it's recognition. Recognition that he had just handed a defense attorney the one detail that only a cooperating informant would ever possess. Jinsu made a sound, not a word. Something smaller than that, something that lived underneath language in the chest where betrayal actually lands. "You," he said, "my sister's son." "Uncle, it's not what it—" "You gave them the codes." Jinsu's voice stayed quiet, quiet as a blade. "You gave them my life." Dae-jung didn't answer. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't confirm what his own mouth had already confirmed for him. Maya glanced down at her smartwatch, tapped it once, logged the time without a sound. 11:47 a.m. A timestamp that would outlive every excuse Dae-jung tried to build after this moment. "You should go," she told him. "Before I decide you're a witness instead of a visitor." He left, fast chair scraping footsteps too quick for a man claiming innocence. The door shut behind him with a heavy final click. Jinsu sat motionless across the table, staring at the space where his nephew had been standing. Not crying, not shouting, just still the way a building stays still right after the foundation gives out before anyone realizes the walls are already coming down. "How much has he signed over?" he said finally. "How much of what I built is already gone?" "I don't know yet." Maya closed her legal pad. "But I intend to find out exactly how deep this goes and exactly who let a machine write your guilt into being." Jinsu nodded once. Slow. Heavy. Outside the holding facility, the timeline that had once seemed like Sterling's forgery now had a face attached to it, a face that shared Jinsu's blood. The knife had come from inside the house. The courtroom felt bigger in daylight, all that mahogany paneling swallowing sound before it could travel. Maya stood at the podium with her motion in hand, 40 pages of algorithmic proof ready to file. She never got the chance to speak first. Before counsel begins, Patricia Owens said, "The court has a ruling to issue." Maya's stomach tightened, fast, cold. This court finds that any public discussion of the ledger's technical authenticity prior to full forensic review risks prejudicing the jury pool. Effective immediately, the defense is barred from raising questions of algorithmic origin in open court. The words landed like a door slamming shut. Maya stood there silent, doing the math on what had just been taken from her. Everything. That's what had just been taken. Richard Sterling leaned against the prosecution table, thumb running slow circles over his gold gavel pin, not looking at Maya, looking past her at the gallery, performing calm for an audience that hadn't caught on yet. "Your Honor," Maya said with respect, "this order strips the defense of its central technical argument before a single expert witness has been heard." "The order stands, Counselor." "Then let the record reflect my objection." Her voice stayed level, flat. "The defense formally objects to this gag order as an unconstitutional restriction on due process and reserves the right to raise this issue on appeal." "So noted." Sterling smiled, small, satisfied, the smile of a man who had just watched someone else's weapon get confiscated at the door. "Careful, Counselor," he said low enough for only her to hear. "Appeals take years. Your client doesn't have years." Maya didn't answer him. She sat back down, opened her folder, and closed it again just as fast. 40 pages. Useless now, at least in this room, at least under these rules. She thought of the 11 flagged pages, the decimal pattern too clean to be human. The evidence that could unravel the entire prosecution if only she were allowed to say the words out loud. Not anymore. Owens moved through the rest of the docket fast business as usual, gavel tapping twice, 3 times, each strike a small confirmation that nothing in this courtroom would slow down for a defense attorney's objections. Maya watched her work, watched the ease of it, A judge protecting a prosecutor's fabricated evidence wasn't laziness. It wasn't oversight. It was investment, the kind that only exists when two people share something worth protecting. What she didn't know yet. The gavel came down one final time. Courts adjourned until Thursday. Sterling gathered his files with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once lost a rigged game. He passed Maya's table on his way out close enough that she caught the cologne, sharp, expensive, a smell that had nothing to do with the courtroom and everything to do with money moving somewhere it shouldn't. "You should have taken the plea deal we offered," he said. "Would have saved everyone a lot of time." "There was no plea deal," Maya said. "There was a threat with better paperwork." His jaw flickered. Barely. A hairline crack that closed again before anyone else could see it. He walked out. Maya stayed seated a moment longer, staring at the space where the gavel had come down, where an entire line of defense had just been erased with 11 words. Marcus Thorne appeared at her side without a sound trenchcoat still damp from the morning rain outside. "That order," he said. "You ever seen anything like it?" "No." Maya closed her folder for the last time that day. Judges protect their own rulings. They don't usually protect a prosecutor's evidence before it's even been tested. Unless they've got a reason to. "Unless they've got a reason to," she repeated. She thought about Dae Jung's watch gold face diamond bezel paid for by someone eager to keep a family silent. She thought about the offshore accounts hiding somewhere beneath 4,000 pages of fabricated ledgers. She thought about a judge whose gavel moved a little too fast, a little too eager whenever Sterling's name came up on the docket. Somewhere in that eagerness was an answer. She didn't have it yet. "I can't win this by following the rules anymore," Maya said, half to herself, half to Thorne, who nodded like he'd already reached the same conclusion days ago. "Then don't." She gathered her things. Outside the hallway buzzed with reporters angling for a quote. Nobody would give them cameras flashing against marble that had seen 100 cases exactly like this one and lost every single time. Not this one, Maya thought. Not this time. The compass swung once against her collarbone as she walked old brass, catching a sliver of light from the tall windows above. The game was rigged. She'd known that walking in. Now she knew exactly how far she'd have to go to burn the table down. The diner sat 2 blocks from the courthouse, the kind of place that stayed open all night because nobody who mattered ever came looking for it. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like it had been made hours ago and reheated out of stubbornness rather than skill. Maya sat in the back booth, turning the brass compass over between 2 fingers. Old habit. The metal was warm from her own hand, worn smooth along one edge where her thumb had rubbed it 1,000 times before. Elena Vance stood near the window arms, crossed over 2 oversized briefcases she refused to set down, eyes fixed on the parking lot outside. 37 years old, Jinsu's longtime paralegal, thick-rimmed glasses catching the neon signs glow every time a car passed on the street. "You're sure he's coming alone?" He said he would. Maya didn't look up. Marcus doesn't lie about things that could end his career. Everybody lies about things that could end their career. The bell above the door rang once. Marcus Thorne walked in trench coat, damp from a light rain that hadn't stopped since morning eyes scanning the room out of habit before he ever reached the booth. He slid in across from Maya without a greeting. "This doesn't leave this table," he said. "You understand that." "I understand." He set a thick manila folder on the table, most of the pages inside, blacked out in long, uneven stripes, names and dates buried under redaction ink applied by someone in a hurry to bury them for good. "Internal affairs file. 3 years old. Nobody was supposed to still have a copy." "But you do." "I kept one." His jaw tightened. "Some nights, I still don't know why." Maya opened the folder, flipping through page after page of blacked-out testimony financial records with entire columns erased, witness names reduced to solid black bars. She read slower than usual, cross-referencing what little remained visible against cases she remembered from 3 years of public defense work in this same courthouse. "This case," she said, tapping one page. "Asset forfeiture ruling 2021. I remember this. The judge who signed off was removed from the bench a year later for unrelated reasons. Except I don't think they were unrelated." They weren't. Elena's eyes stayed locked on the parking lot. A truck rolled past slow, and her whole body went rigid until it kept driving. There were 4 rulings like that one, Marcus said. Same pattern: small business owner, sudden fraud allegations, assets seized before trial even starts. Every single time the case gets fast-tracked through the same judge's courtroom. Owens. Owens. He said the name like it cost him something. And every single time the seized assets get routed through a shell account before liquidation. Offshore. Cayman Islands. Maya's hands went still over the folder. "Whose account?" Marcus leaned in, voice dropping low enough that Elena had to strain to hear it from the window. "Same account. Every time. Sterling's name isn't on it directly, but the routing numbers trace back to a holding company registered the same month he made partner at the DA's office." The silence that followed had weight, real weight, pressing down on the booth like something physical. "He's not just prosecuting Jin Soo," Maya said slowly. "He's harvesting him. He's been harvesting people for years. Owen signs the rulings. Sterling directs the assets. Somebody else launders it clean on the other end. Why would a sitting federal judge risk her entire career for a cut of stolen assets?" Marcus's jaw worked once before he answered. "Because it's not a cut. It's the whole retirement. 4 rulings, 4 seizures, tens of millions moved through that one account over 6 years. That's not corruption for spare cash. That's a woman building an exit." Elena finally turned from the window, face pale under the diner's flickering light. "If Sterling finds out Marcus gave you this..." "He won't." Marcus's voice didn't waver. "Not from me. Not from you." Maya closed the folder, careful like it might come apart in her hands if she moved too fast. "I need the offshore banking records, actual account numbers, not redacted names in a 3-year-old file. They're not digital anymore. Not since the last data breach scare. Everything got pulled and archived hard copy, only locked in the evidence room at the central precinct." "Locked how?" Marcus reached into his coat and set a single brass key on the table between them, old unmarked, the kind of key that didn't officially exist anymore in any log. 48 hours, he said. "That's what you've got before trial reconvenes. After that, I can't protect this key existing at all." Maya picked it up, turned it once between her fingers, same motion as the compass, same quiet weight of something borrowed against a debt she didn't know if she could ever repay. 48 hours, she repeated. Outside, the rain had picked up again, tapping steady against the diner's window, the parking lot empty except for Marcus's car idling under a broken streetlight. Elena gathered her briefcases, hands trembling slightly despite her best effort to hide it. Maya slid the key into her jacket pocket, next to nothing, against everything. The hunt was on.
Absolutely not. The nephew sold out the only man who took care of him, just to steal the family business, alongside a corrupt DA. If that were me, I would have dragged him across that visitation table immediately. Imagine sitting in handcuffs, realizing your own blood handed you over to the wolves for a new watch. The audacity.
The precinct basement smelled like mildew and old paper, decades of case files stacked floor to ceiling in boxes that hadn't been touched since the administrations that filed them left office. A single bulb flickered overhead, buzzing every few seconds like it was deciding whether to give out completely. Maya pressed the brass key into the lock. It turned stiff, reluctant, then gave way with a groan that echoed too loud in the empty stairwell behind them. 20 minutes, Elena whispered, briefcase clutched against her chest. The patrol resets at 2. If we're still in here... We won't be. Maya stepped inside first. Rows of shelving stretched back into darkness. Evidence tags fluttering slightly in the draft from the door. Decades of asset forfeiture cases boxed and forgotten by everyone except the people who'd once lost everything to them. She started at the far wall. Dates first. She needed 2018 through 2021, the years Marcus's redacted file had pointed toward 4 rulings. One shell account, tens of millions moving quietly offshore while judges and prosecutors built their exits on someone else's ruin. Boxes came down fast. Dust rose in thin clouds under the flickering light. Mislabeled folders slid apart in her hands. Water-damaged pages, decades old, ink smudged past recognition. Anything. Elena's voice was tight, controlled panic, barely held in check. Not yet. 15 minutes gone. Maya's fingers moved faster now, tearing through folder after folder, box after box, refusing to slow down even as her back ached and her knees pressed into a floor that hadn't been cleaned in years. Maya, 12 minutes. I heard you. She found the 4th box mislabeled under a completely wrong case number, shoved into a corner shelf like someone had wanted it forgotten on purpose. Inside, buried under unrelated paperwork, sat a thin folder with no name on the tab at all. She opened it. Deposit slips. Dozens of them. Handwritten, routing numbers, wire transfer confirmations dates, stretching across 6 years, all funneling into the same offshore account number Marcus had described at the diner. Her breath caught. Elena, come here. Elena crossed the room, fast briefcase forgotten on the floor behind her. She looked over Maya's shoulder at the top slip, hands flying to her mouth. That's Dae-jung's signature. Maya flipped to the next slip. Same handwriting, same account. A transfer dated 3 weeks earlier, 12 days after Jin Su's arrest, $140,000 routed straight into the same Cayman Islands account. She kept flipping. Faster now. The next slip made her stop completely. Same routing number. Different signature this time. Careful. Delivered a name she recognized instantly from every ruling she'd watched signed into existence over the past 6 weeks. Patricia Owens. 10 minutes, Elena said, voice cracking. Maya, we have to go. Maya photographed each slip, fast hands steady, despite everything screaming inside her to hurry, to run, to leave this basement before the patrol came back around. Deposit after deposit. Dae-jung's transfers feeding directly into Owen's personal account, the same account Sterling Shell Company had been laundering through for years. Money, power, silence. The whole conspiracy laid bare in 11 pages of handwritten proof nobody was ever supposed to find again. Got it, Maya said finally, folder pressed flat against her chest. We're done. They moved fast back toward the door, footsteps echoing too loud against concrete evidence boxes shoved back into place with less care than they deserved. Elena reached the stairwell, first hand on the door, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no radio static. Just the building's own tired breathing settling around them. Clear, she whispered. They slipped out into the night, the precinct's back alley empty except for a distant siren fading somewhere across town. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, the folder tucked inside her jacket now pressed flat against skin that could still feel every second of those 20 minutes. Elena locked the door behind them, key trembling slightly in her hand before she managed to steady it. We have it, she said. We actually have it. Maya didn't answer right away. She stood in the alley, rain starting again, cold against her face, the weight of 11 pages suddenly heavier than anything she'd carried into that basement. They had the deposit slips. They had Dae-jung's transfers. They had a sitting federal judge's own signature tying her directly to a conspiracy that had already destroyed one man's empire and nearly buried another's life along with it. They had proof. What they didn't have, not yet, was any way to use it without putting a target on both their backs the moment Sterling realized his records had gone missing. Maya pulled her jacket tighter against the rain folder, pressed close compass, swinging once against her collarbone in the dark. They had the weapon. Now she had to figure out how to survive long enough to fire it. Morning light cut hard through the courthouse's tall windows, throwing long bars of gray across the marble floor. Maya walked in with her briefcase heavier than usual, 11 pages of proof tucked inside a hidden compartment ready to end this. She didn't make it past the hallway. Counselor. Sterling stepped out from the corridor leading to Chambers' gold pin, catching the light smile already in place before she'd said a word. You look tired. I look ready. Ready for what exactly? He fell into step beside her unhurried the way a predator moves when it already knows the outcome. Ready to represent a client whose lawyer no longer has a functioning law firm. Maya stopped walking. What did you do? Me. He spread his hands, mock innocent, the gesture of a man performing for witnesses who weren't even there yet. I filed a motion. Your firm's accounts, all of them frozen as of 6 this morning. Evidence tampering allegations tend to trigger that kind of thing. There's no tampering. There's no evidence you haven't already fabricated yourself. Prove it, he said, quiet now, almost gentle, which made it worse. Oh, wait, you can't. Not without funds, not without an expert witness to authenticate whatever you think you found. Funny how that works. Maya's grip on her briefcase tightened until her knuckles went pale, until the leather handle bit into her palm hard enough to leave a mark. You had my accounts frozen before I could even present anything in court. I had them frozen because a disbarred attorney can't represent anyone. Sterling's smile widened. Filed that motion, too. Evidence tampering, unethical conduct, take your pick. The Bar Association loves a good scandal. She said nothing. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't hand him exactly the reaction he was hunting for. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping to something almost soft. Walk away, Maya, today. Nobody remembers the lawyer who lost. Everybody remembers the one who got disbarred trying. She held his gaze. Steady, silent. The kind of silence that has weight, the kind that presses down on a chest instead of filling it with air. Sterling straightened, adjusted his cuff, and walked past her toward the courtroom doors without waiting for an answer he'd already decided he didn't need. Maya stood alone in the hallway for a long moment. Behind the small viewing window set into the holding cell door down the corridor, Jin-Soo watched. He couldn't hear the conversation. He didn't need to. Her face told him everything Sterling's words had just done. She walked toward the courtroom instead of away from it. Inside, Patricia Owen sat, waiting gavel already resting near her hand like a decision that had been made before anyone argued the case. Your Honor, Maya began, the prosecution has frozen my firm's operating accounts without proper notice or hearing, effectively stripping the defense of resources needed to authenticate material evidence. The motion was properly filed, Counselor. The motion was filed to silence the defense before we could present anything. That's a serious accusation. It's an accurate one. Owen's expression didn't shift. She reached for a document already prepared, already signed in advance of this exact objection, and set it in front of her without ceremony. The asset freeze stands. This court finds sufficient grounds for the allegations raised. The defense will proceed with whatever resources currently remain available. The gavel came down. Once. Final. Maya stood motionless at the podium, the sound of that single strike still ringing somewhere behind her ribs. 11 pages of proof sat in her briefcase, useless now, without an expert witness. She no longer had funds to hire, without a forensic authentication process that cost money she no longer had access to. The walls closed in. Slowly, completely. She thought of the deposit slips, Dae-jung's signature, Owens' own handwriting tying her directly to the very ruling that had just been handed down against Maya's own firm. The judge had frozen her out with the same pen that had signed her own guilt into permanent record. Maya gathered her things, hands steady despite everything, and walked back down the aisle past Sterling, who didn't bother hiding his satisfaction this time. Outside the courtroom, she found a bench and sat, briefcase across her knees, compass warm under her palm, where she'd been gripping it without realizing. Truth without means. Proof without a voice. A weapon with no way left to fire it. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. No longer. Then she opened them, stood, and started walking because there was nothing left to do but find another way through walls that had just closed on every side at once. The courtroom filled slower than usual that morning, every seat in the gallery taken, reporters lining the back wall 3 deep. Closing arguments. Everyone had come to watch the ending. Jin-Soo sat beside Maya at the defense table, wrists cuffed. Spine straight, silver hair combed the same as every day before. He looked steady. He looked the way he always looked. He wasn't. "Your Honor," Maya said, "the defense requests a short recess before closing arguments begin." "Denied," Owens said without looking up from her notes. "We proceed as scheduled." Sterling stood at the prosecution table, unhurried, gathering papers he didn't need, stretching every second like taffy. Maya recognized the tactic. Delay. Exhaustion. Wear the defense down to nothing before the final blow. She glanced at Jin-Soo. His breathing had changed. Shallow. Too shallow. "Your Honor, my client requires his heart medication. It was due 40 minutes ago. Security protocols require processing time for all medical requests," Sterling said, not even looking at her. "We can't simply hand a defendant unverified substances mid-trial. It's prescribed medication. It's documented. It's been administered every morning for 6 weeks. Procedures exist for a reason, counselor." Maya turned to the bailiffs near the wall. "Please, he needs it now." Nobody moved. Nobody had been told to move. And in this room, nobody moved without permission. Jin-Soo's hand pressed flat against his chest. Slow. Deliberate. Not dramatic. Just present the way pain sits in a body that refuses to make noise about it. "I'm fine," he said quietly to Maya, not to the room. He wasn't. Sterling began his closing statement, words about racketeering, words about criminal enterprise, words that filled the room while Jin-Soo's breathing grew thinner beside her, one shallow pull after another. Maya's hand found his arm under the table. Steady. His wasn't. "Bailiff." Her voice cracked the courtroom's rhythm. "He needs a medic, now." "Order," Owen said. "Counselor, you will not interrupt." Jin-Soo made a sound, small. Then he collapsed. The gavel never finished its sentence. Chairs scraped. Someone screamed. Maya was already on the floor, knees hitting marble-hard hands on his chest, his handcuffs scraping her wrist as she pulled him toward her. "Jin-Soo." Nothing. "Jin-Soo." His eyes opened halfway. Found hers. Held. "Somebody call a medic." Her voice tore through the chaos, raw, cracking apart at the edges. Now. Bailiffs moved finally too slow. Radios crackling, voices shouting instructions nobody followed fast enough. Maya pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling the stutter beneath her hand, the terrible unevenness of a heart running out of time. Sterling stood at his table, watching, not moving, not speaking. Just watching, cold, still, a man observing weather from behind glass. "Help him," Maya said, to anyone, to no one. "Please." Jin-Soo's hand found hers, weak, barely there. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes said it instead, the same steady look he'd given her across a visitation table, across a courtroom, across 15 years since the night he'd found a homeless girl sleeping behind his restaurant and decided she was worth saving. Now she was on her knees, unable to save him back. Paramedics finally broke through the gallery gurney, rattling across marble hands, pulling him from her grip. She held on until the last possible second, fingers slipping from his as they lifted him away. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stay." He was gone through the doors before she finished the word. Maya knelt alone on the courtroom floor. Handcuffed proceedings scattered around her, silence pressing down heavy, complete. Time was entirely up. She looked up, found Sterling still standing at his table, still watching, still smiling, just slightly, just enough for her to see it and know exactly what it meant. Something inside her went quiet, not defeated, finished waiting. The rulebook that had protected men like Sterling for years, the rules she'd followed, filed, objected to, respected, even while they strangled her, all of it burned away in that single moment on the floor. She rose slowly, compass swinging once against her collarbone. No more objections. No more waiting on justice that had never once intended to arrive on its own. The rulebook burned. The gallery hadn't settled by the time paramedics cleared the doors, Jinsu's gurney vanishing down the corridor with 2 officers jogging alongside it. Owens banged her gavel 3 times, sharp, furious, demanding order in a room that had none left to give. "Counsel will proceed with closing arguments immediately," she said, "or the defense forfeits." Maya stood at the defense table, tears still wet on her face, and wiped them away with the back of her hand. Once. Done. Sterling watched from the prosecution table, arms crossed, a grin spreading slow and certain. Her client incapacitated, her firm's accounts frozen, her expert witness unfunded. He'd built this moment for weeks, and now it had arrived exactly on schedule. "Your Honor," he said, barely hiding the satisfaction in his voice, "given the circumstances, perhaps the defense would prefer to forfeit gracefully." Maya didn't answer him. She stood. She walked to the center of the courtroom, past the jury box, past the exhausted gallery, and stopped directly beneath the judge's bench, staring up at Patricia Owens with a stillness that made the room go quiet before she'd said a single word. Marcus Thorne stood at the back of the gallery, hand resting near his badge, watching, waiting for a signal only the 2 of them understood. "Your Honor," Maya said, "the defense has new evidence to present. This court has already ruled on the ledger's authenticity. That matter is closed." "This isn't about the ledgers." Maya's voice stayed level, quiet, steady as stone. "This is about you." Owens's pen stopped moving. "Excuse me?" Maya reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet encrypted screen, dark until her thumb pressed against it. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for an objection. She turned it toward the courtroom monitors. The screen split wide across every display in the room. Deposit slips filling the frame one after another. Routing numbers, transfer dates, 6 years of wire confirmations feeding into a single offshore account. "Objection!" Sterling was on his feet. "Your Honor, this hasn't been authenticated. This isn't—" "Let's discuss the $4.2 million deposited into your Cayman account yesterday, Your Honor." The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that has weight pressing down on every chest in the gallery at once. Owens's face drained of color, the exact shade of old concrete, gray and lifeless in a way no makeup could fix. Her pen slipped from her fingers, clattering against the bench, loud in a room where nobody dared breathe. "Turn that off," she said, voice cracking. "Turn that off immediately." "Same account Mr. Sterling's shell company has been laundering through since he made partner," Maya continued, unbothered, unhurried. "Same account your own signature appears on right here, dated 3 weeks ago. This is inadmissible. This is—" "Cut the feed," Sterling was shouting now, sweat breaking across his forehead, gold pin catching the light as he lunged toward the bailiff's station. Somebody cut that projection. Nobody moved to help him. The gallery had erupted, reporters scrambling for phones, spectators half rising from their seats, a wave of noise crashing through the courtroom that no gavel could silence anymore. "Not negligence," Maya said loud enough to cut through the chaos, eyes locked on Owens. "That's not oversight. That's a decision. Made over and over, 4 times 6 years, tens of millions in stolen assets funneled straight into your retirement." Owen said nothing. She couldn't. Her hands trembled visibly against the bench gavel, forgotten, dropped somewhere near her lap. Marcus Thorne moved from the back of the gallery, badge out now, 2 federal marshals falling in step behind him without a word needing to pass between them. Sterling backed away from the prosecution table, first step slow, second step faster, the polished confidence gone from his face entirely. "This is a setup," he said. "This is entirely fabricated. This woman has no right to—" "I have every right." Maya's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Bar number 88214. lead counsel for the defense. Exactly like I told you on day one. The monitors kept playing. Deposit slip after deposit slip, undeniable, unredacted 6 years of evidence nobody could argue away no matter how loud they shouted over it. Owen sat frozen at the bench, the woman who had signed every ruling that mattered for a decade now, staring at her own signature broadcast across a room full of cameras and federal agents. The power in the room had inverted completely. Not slowly, not gently. All at once, the way a building falls once the foundation gives out beneath it. Sterling's mouth kept moving, words spilling out fast, and useless objections nobody was listening to anymore. The hunter had become the hunted. And Maya stood in the center of it all, compass swinging once against her collarbone, watching 6 years of stolen empires collapse in real time under the weight of 11 pages she'd nearly died carrying out of a basement 2 nights before. Federal agents flooded the courtroom within minutes, boots against marble radios, crackling orders. Nobody in the gallery fully understood yet. 2 agents moved to the main doors and locked them from the outside, sealing every exit before anyone at the prosecution table could think to run. Sterling's composure had cracked completely. Sweat soaked through his collar. His hands shook as he pointed across the room, voice climbing towards something close to panic. Dae-jung Park orchestrated this, he said. The nephew. He's the one who fed me the internal codes. He built the entire ledger scheme I had nothing to do with. Save it for the grand jury, one agent said, already moving toward him with handcuffs drawn. Maya stood at the defense table, still unhurried, the compass resting quiet against her chest. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the remaining physical copies, deposit slips, wire transfers, internal affairs files, and handed them to the lead agent without a word wasted. Everything's here, she said. Chain of custody documented, timestamps included. The agent nodded once, took the files, and moved on. Sterling's arms were pulled behind his back cuffs, clicking shut around wrists that had never once known restraint. He twisted against them, still shouting, still pointing fingers at anyone who might listen. This is a witch hunt I built, that prosecution's office I made partner through, merit through work, not through 6 years of laundered assets, Maya said quietly. Your own words, your own account. He had nothing left to answer that with. Patricia Owen sat motionless at the bench as agents approached her, robes still hanging perfectly straight despite everything collapsing around her. She didn't fight the cuffs. She didn't speak at all, just stared forward at nothing. A woman watching a decade of careful theft unravel in front of cameras she'd never expected to see. Dae-jung was found in the hallway outside, caught trying to slip out through a side exit before the doors locked. Agents brought him back in wrists-bound designer watch still gleaming under the courtroom lights, useless now against everything it had cost him. 3 men, 3 women's worth of stolen empires all walked out in cuffs while camera flashes lit the hallway like lightning that wouldn't stop. Marcus Thorne watched from near the jury box, badge still out, a small tired satisfaction settling into his face for the first time in weeks. Maya didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply gathered her things folder by folder and walked toward the doors the agents had finally reopened, past reporters shouting questions she had no intention of answering that day. 3 weeks passed before Jinsu Park walked out of the hospital, fully recovered, silver hair combed the same as always, wearing a simple gray suit instead of an orange jumpsuit for the first time in months. Maya waited for him at the entrance compass, still swinging against her collarbone, the same one she'd worn into that courtroom on the first day she'd walked past armed bailiffs to save his life. You look tired, he said. You look free. He studied her for a long moment, the same steady look he'd given her across a visitation table when everything seemed lost. 15 years ago. He said, I found a girl sleeping behind my restaurant. She had nothing, no family, no money, nothing but a stubborn refusal to ask anyone for help. I remember. I gave her a roof, a meal, a last name to put on paperwork. He reached into his jacket and produced a folder, formal, sealed, already signed. Now I'm giving her everything else. Maya opened it. Legal transfer documents. Full operational and legal control of everything Jinsu had built, signed over completely his name, replaced by hers on every page that mattered. I don't need this, she said quietly. No. Jinsu agreed. But you've earned it, every page. She closed the folder, holding it against her chest, the same way she'd held 11 pages of evidence in a basement 2 nights before everything changed. Somewhere across the city, Sterling sat in a federal holding cell, Owens in another, Dae-jung in a third, 3 separate empires of theft, finally answering to the same justice they'd spent years convincing themselves would never reach them. Jinsu's legacy stood intact, protected now permanently by the homeless girl he'd once given a roof to, who had grown into the only person strong enough to burn down the system that tried to take it from him. Justice was served.
Fiction. But that feeling? Maya's fierce loyalty to the man who saved her is a bond we all crave. I've watched people abuse their authority, assuming the voiceless couldn't fight back. How far would you go to protect the person who gave you your first real chance? Comment below, like, share, subscribe.